friendship between two young Black teenagers navigating the harrowing trials of reform school together in Florida. We want to thank Amazon MGM Studio for bringing this film to our community, as well as Angelica Film Center for being a great venue partner. And we encourage you to stay after the screening. There will be a Q&A with RaMell Ross, director and writer, as well as, or moderated by David Ehrlich, film critic at IndieWire. So thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy the film.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Is this on? Yeah?
I know, right? What has changed?
Thank you so much for being here for this extraordinary film. I will not embarrass you by telling you how extraordinary I feel it is. I feel like this isn't on, but that's fine. Can anyone not hear me?
I feel like they gave all your power to the lights here.
It's all right.
It seems like.
They are bright, and no one really needs to hear
There we
what I'm
go.
saying. Here we go. All right, a lot to get into. I want to start by asking you a little bit about time, which is sort of any filmmaker's greatest resource. You know, making your extraordinary documentary, Hale County, this evening, you had an indefinite and almost infinite amount of time at your disposal to wait for the right moment, to discover the images that you were looking for. And then you cut to Nickel Boys, when you're making a $20 million movie or so, where every minute is accounted for over the course of...
Every minute.
Yeah.
Every single minute.
I'm sure. And, you know, you have a very short production window relative to the expanse of the film that you've made. And, you know, you're in a position where you're crafting images instead of finding them. How did that change your approach to your process?
Yeah, I love the question, and someone asked that question in not that same language like a week ago, and I don't know if I have a good answer for it yet. And I think, you know, as my homie, who doesn't know he's my homie, Richard Feynman, would say, like, you often have to use metaphors and analogs for anything, like there's no way to talk directly about something in most cases. And so I kind of think it's like I played sports, and so over the course of a season, you play as well as you practiced your whole life, you know? And you spend the summers practicing, and the next season you play a little better, and like sometimes you play horribly, sometimes you miss everything in the scene. You just say, it doesn't come together, it doesn't make it in, you'll never know, you know? But it's more that, like, I've spent so much time making images. I know how to frame. The film was framed before it was even went into production. Obviously the timing of the movement is where, which we're, you know, sort of trying to mimic the neck and trying to approach consciousness with a couple specific conceptual entryways. That kind of becomes what you rely on. But I will say, mostly, one thing Jomo and I realized, I think within the first 3 or 4 days, is that you have to miss stuff. Is that if you hit a mark, then it feels artificial. But if you do what the human being does, which is you're in the world is not something that is pointed to you. You just have to, like, find your way, and sometimes it sinks, sometimes it doesn't. Then fundamentally it feels like what the roving eye does.
Did that philosophy allow you to preserve a sense of discovery similar to one sort of growing process in Hale County?
Yeah, it did. And also, I think the form itself is a discovery. You know, like, we're in the scene, like, we have a manifesto we read every day, and, like, you know, the way that we are trying to move the camera is new. At least, I mean, I did it in Hale County, but not exactly that. Like, it wasn't, I was doing my own consciousness. I wasn't, like, trying to represent a character's relationship to the world and the way that they see it and stuff. So it was different, but yeah.
Right, so to talk about perspectives, you know, inevitable, and we get there sooner rather than later. You know, Elwood is obviously always known that he's Black, but as you read the book, you began to wonder at what point Elwood began to realize that he was racist.
Yeah.
And that led you to consider telling the story from his subjective point of view. And the construction of that self-image is so especially vivid during the first 20 minutes of the movie or so, where you're seeing his reflection in the iron, in the window of the store, and you feel his sort of physical consciousness growing at the same time as his political consciousness is sort of coming into being. How did you go about sort of creating what would become sort of the nexus of the whole film's world, you know, from those opening 20 minutes? I mean, what was the approach to that period of the film?
Yeah, it was remembering images from my childhood, and because as Colson has said, he is Elwood Turner. I am also Elwood Turner, so it was kind of, in that sense, quite easy to explore or try to translate what it was like to look from the eyes of a young black child. I think that was the first step, and then I think it was just trying to notice. You know, I think my favorite image in the film, it's not my favorite image, but I think an image that most people miss quite naturally because the film is dense and the images are dense is like when he's looking out the bus window, you can kind of, in that first sequence, second sequence, you can kind of see his reflection, but there's like two black kids walking on the street, and then there's like a white guy and a white woman walking, and they get off, and then they walk around. It happens kind of fast, you could like kind of easily miss it, but those types of little markers of power are what you notice when you're, you know, a person of color, or you're a person of, you're just a person. I mean, every person has their version of them. Men and women are treated differently. If you have blonde hair, people look at you a different way than you have black hair. There's something about separating difference and making meaning in signifiers. So, yeah, I go about it by thinking about what it looked like for me, and then trying to articulate it in a clear way so that it can just be legible for, of course, the viewer. I will say though, as you would know, and you all would know, films get whittled down by necessity. I mean, I would have had that first 20 minutes be fucking 8 hours. You know, like, yeah, that being, oh my God. I mean, we did end up shooting images, obviously, because of the time, but I mean, Boyd was like the original sort of layout for what Elle was coming into being a more conscious and more self-reflective person. Boy, would that have been like so much fun.
I mean, all the shots you choose are just, they immediately stay in your memory. But this is a movie that is sort of composed of one transcendent moment after another, but I think the one that really sticks with me, at least from the first time I saw the film, was when you have a perspective switch to Turner's point of view, which is something that as a viewer I didn't necessarily know was going to happen. It was just at the moment where I was sort of, you know, dazzled by the Jomo's cinematography and how beautiful the images were, but thinking, you know, is he going to find a way to make Owen more than an avatar for this character? Am I going to be pushed out a little bit, or is he going to invite me in further? And then that moment when you create the sense of transference between the two is just so, you know, mind expanding, and it sort of deepens your emotional connection to the rest of the movie. How did you arrive at that decision? What were you hoping the dynamic to sort of be between the two characters and how they saw each other?
Yeah, we wanted, well, I think once, you know, we decided to approach it with POV, you know, the first question one has to ask, well, first of all, we called it like sentient perspective on set, and that was like Jomo's and my thing, but we used POV just so people had some entryway into what we're talking about. Once you really, when you're like, okay, I want to make the film in POV, you're like, well, who gets it? Like, why doesn't everyone get it? Okay, no, I'll just give it to all the black folks. But wait, maybe that's too much. Like maybe that's going to be either confusing or too jarring, and say, okay, only Elwood gets it. But then if you kind of apply that, and then you're like, wait, what if the two main characters get it, and you realize that they could only see each other? It's just like it was like the most beautiful realization, like spiritual. Like of course, like that allows that transfer. Everyone goes through the world and has their people that can actually see them, while everyone else is also looking. And so I think that kind of just became the way that it would be. And I guess with that, you realize that the process of someone seeing you is a process of maybe you seeing them, and like you are kind of fundamentally mixing alchemy. Like it's not, you guys are less, it's like there's some sort of merging that happens, and then you can like try to figure out ways to use Turner's vision, Turner's camera use to like iterate his changes, and then you can use Elwood's to iterate the others, and then start like, you know, confusing the audience in a productive way.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about quantum entanglement, but we're also sort of talking about empathy, you know, like really, and forgive me for how long this question is, and the fact that I'm going to quote you in it, but, you know, when you were talking about Hale County, you said that from points of view, I would argue that most problems in the world that have to do with inequality would be solved. You know, in that light, it's striking that you then went on to make a film that is entirely shot in the first person, but it's sort of a film that liberates us from our ego precisely by sticking us in the first person twice over. I mean, you're using the body to liberate us from our body. You're using the camera to free us from our eyes. You know, was that sort of born out of the frustration of the limitations of conventional dramatic storytelling? I mean, like a sense that just looking at someone isn't enough. A sense that like, you know, movies like Green Book or whatever are just sort of selling audiences on the empty promise of their own empathy rather than organically developing it from within.
Yes, but like kind of after I realized that it's inherent in the Western use of the camera. My like deep interest is the history of Southern photography, and which is, I would say, largely, if not solely, responsible for the sort of fine art, social do-good aesthetic for like, and even maybe the sort of fine art photojournalistic aesthetic, which is its origin is like the production almost method for like all social sciences, like all field work kind of originates out of Du Bois's work and this other guy, maybe like Franz Boas or William something. But I think like my deep theory is that the camera is Christian, in that, and I wonder like what does a polytheistic lens look like? Like what would happen if the camera was born in another zeitgeist? You know, you think about the relationship between European values, Western values, and its relationship to spirituality. It's like everything here is just like a little holding thing, you know, like we're all different people, and then like God is way up there or way out there, it's outside of our bodies. Like that's what the camera does, like it others. It doesn't, it's not integrated, it's a pointer. But you think about some of the Eastern intellectual traditions in which there is no separation between self, there is no pointing. How would that camera be used? Because you can't, like, this is the same, so what are you looking at? You know, they would, in the same way that Japanese or Eastern paintings, you know, always have small figures in big landscapes, because the US, I mean, people aren't the center of the world. And so I think it sort of originated with just the problem of the camera itself, and then fundamentally trying to approximate with Hell County what it looks like to look from my eyes, and just trying to, as I like saying in this manifesto I wrote, trying to make the camera an organ. Like how do you get so selfish with your point of view of the camera that it's as true as your reality, which is then transferably understandable by someone else, because you're not feigning an objective view of the world, you're just giving them what is deeply you, and everyone has that, you know.
Yeah, and now listening to you talk about the sort of the Christianity of the camera, and I sort of understand why working with the producers of Tree of Life was such an appeal to you.
Yeah, it's really funny because I never got like, everyone's like, so like, did you like want to make this movie? I'm like, you don't understand, like after I made Hell County, and like I got hundreds of emails to make films, like tons of people. I don't think I responded to one out of respect. I mean, like I respect all the asks, but just not interested, you know? And I never took one meeting, never. But then Dee and Jeremy called, and I was like, well, Dee made Tree of Life. Literally, I was like, let's see what they're talking about, you know? Yeah.
I mean, and to the best of my knowledge, I mean, going from Hell County to this film, you had never worked or directed actors before, which is remarkable when you see this movie. But the acting that was on this film was rather unconventional, and that your actors also had to sort of be camera people at the same time as well. I mean, how did you accommodate working with actors, directing actors, into your approach to filmmaking? How did you make it an organic part of that process, and sort of get them in sync with what you were trying to do?
Yeah, you know, I tried not to think too much about it. I like, once I knew we were gonna make the film, I like immediately went on YouTube and was like, how do you direct? You know, like, you know, it was like, oh, like I found some guy's channel and I was like, that seems like that could work.
That got you a special thing.
But I mean, I coach basketball. You know, I coach basketball. I taught. I teach. In my images, and I use like a 8x10 camera. I'm like, there's tons of direction, and I mean, I like to, when people are like, I want to make like an observational documentary, and I want to like, and I'm like, you do understand that the whole fly on the wall thing is just, I don't know who the hell said that once, but they should be apologetic, you know? I think, you know, when you have a camera, I mean, not even talking about the history of the power dynamics of going into communities in which people can't say no to you. More that like, you can direct someone by not saying anything with your body, you know? And like, people think somehow by like them standing on the side of a wall, even without a camera, is not a form of direction. Like this is integral to the moment in time with those people. And so I kind of fundamentally think I understand a little bit about that, but also my interest was not in them any of the characters, any of like Aunjanue, Hamish, Brandon, Ethan, all of them, and Fred, David, all the great actors that are in it, of doing anything that I wanted them to do what they wanted to do. Because what they wanted to do was authentic. What I want them to do is what I want them to do. And I don't like telling people what to do, you know?
But also, you know, you were not abandoning sort of the moments of visual art that you had practiced in the past. I'm thinking particularly of the archival footage that is in the movie. And then I found so striking, I mean, one of the many elements about it that stuck with me was the use of Apollo 8 rather than one of the later Apollo missions. And it's a scouting mission. It's a mission that's sort of trying to bridge the gap between where we've been and where we'd like to go. And that felt very emotionally resonant to me with its use in the film. But really what I was blown away by is the fact that you lean on the archival footage more as the film reaches its climax rather than less, which seems counter to, I think, what most people would assume, you know, in a film that's interpolating that footage. And yet, the climax is all the more powerful for that. How did you sort of balance how you wanted to integrate that and entrust so much of the emotional power of the story to those previously recorded images at the end?
Yeah, that's such a good question. That's, you know, kind of like, I imagine you could ask a version of that question for someone who's like made an actual material sculpture, like a physical sculpture, and then like it seems to be like deeply changing form as it hits its like, you know, lateral climax or something, and they're like, I was like doing, well, you know, I was like this, and I did that, and you're like, that doesn't help me at all, you know. The archival is, to me, my interest in the archival is so visceral because I feel like people are trapped in it. I think that obviously, and I say this so much because of the power dynamics of the camera, people's relationship to the camera is just so utilitarian. People are overly determined. They're in moments of time and recorded, and they're almost just statistics, like visual statistics or something. And so I wanted to find moments, and it's not exactly asking, but hopefully it helps. I wanted to find moments that where we could rescue them, where there were moments where you got a glimpse of that person, or there was something, I like to say, epic banal about it that elevates it beyond the thing. It's consumption in relation to the camera, and in relationship to how it increases in consistency over time. I mean, I would have done it more if I thought it would work more. I think that there's nothing more interesting to have people understand that the documented things that we call the archive are literally every moment around us. And what's dramatic cinema has done was given us a safe entertainment space to let the reality of the recorded moment be, one, like important for understanding this, but also kind of weirdly separate, as if like our reading of this isn't because of the reading of the news footage that came a couple years ago. And it probably sounds like super conceptual, but it feels like so real, you know, and I mean,
you feel the movie even if you don't have the words for it. So,
yeah.
And I also, you know, when talking about the ending of the film, also want to talk about I feel like flash forwards is the wrong word because the movie exists in sort of a continuum of time as you get from the archival images. I mean, the characters are being sort of sublimated into time, which is one of the many things that I love about it. But I do just want to ask about the choice to break the POV, strict POV, you know, through the eye approach that you developed in the film at that point to shoot from the back of Davide's head, and what gave rise to that choice?
Yeah, I just thought that I love that you said that it's the film, even kind of though it feels linear, isn't. I think something that, you know, if you read Carlo Rovelli's The Order of Time, which I've like mentioned in another interview, you know, he speaks so beautifully about time. He's like a quantum gravitational physicist, but like everything is happening simultaneously. And I'm sure this is like pop knowledge at this point, but like how do you iterate that in film? And to me, archival, like someone is watching the archival thing making meaning while we're watching the film making meaning. Like the meaning is always kind of there. So how do you kind of like make a long horizontal sweep of the moment, of the historical moment? How do you like to say like thicken the present? I don't know, some philosophers said like how thick is the present? How do you thicken the present, make it as, you know, because, you know, we go outside, but like really outside is the same outside as like 100 years ago, blah, 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 blah. So What did you ask?
Just the choice to put the camera behind.
Oh. Well, because you all have seen the film, I can tell you, when Elwood is shot, it pops behind Turner for the first time, and so he kind of like goes out of body, like he loses himself. He's like no longer the camera's no longer here. It's just like out because he's kind of broken in a way, and so we're introduced to him as older, as a broken man, trying to essentially get the camera back into his body.
Oh, wow.
And so he, we want you all to believe that it's adult Elwood. We call him adult Elwood in the script, so when you're reading it, you're not like, that's Turner. We want you to believe that it's Elwood, when really it's Turner. And that's supposed to be the moment where it becomes clear. And then over the course of the montage, he's going through everything he's remembered, everything he's ever seen, the feeling he's had, and kind of like, King's death is in there. Like he's getting to himself. He's finding, and like, one of my favorite lines to like connect to the montage is he's like, they're digging, I'm digging. Like he's digging in himself. Like he's confronting the thing that he's never been able to confront. And he saved Elwood's life, though Elwood actually physically died. He saved Elwood's life by taking his name, and he continued to live with Elwood, essentially so that he could get to this moment to become who he is. And he finds Millie, love, and then he's himself.
Something really beautiful you said is that this isn't a film about Elwood's death, but it's something about sort of trying to postpone his life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you feel that act of rescue. I mean, you talk about archival images, you talk about sort of rescuing these people, like carrying them forward in the way that we all sort of carry the past with us. I mean, it's beautifully done through that. And the casting of Daveed Diggs is fascinating because, one, I don't think any film has used his voice as beautifully as an instrument, as it was in Hamilton, it is in here.
Was he in The Little Mermaid as Sebastian?
I mean,
I must not have seen that.
So don't tell Barry, but I'm very strict about I'm very pure about my Disney original.
Yeah.
I think we have it once. But so it's beautifully cast in that sense that his voice is such an important role. But at the same time, there is a part of the voice in the back of your own head that say he doesn't look like Elwood. You're priming the way in a way for us to. There's a cognitive dissonance. I guess I'm wondering. The question is are you deliberately trying to trigger a sort of cognitive dissonance so that we are, by the time we get to the reveal, we're like, yeah, I sort of knew that the whole way.
Yeah. We wanted it to be super clear, but for you to also, we wanted to just lie to you.
Yeah.
Which is, when I say it that way, I'm like, that's pretty unethical.
No, that's great. It's like
Yeah.
fake. It's like,
Yeah.
Cinema is alive.
Yeah, it is. We wanted to lead the audience. We wanted to lead the audience on in a productive way to make you maybe look closer, and to know to maybe there's something about like trusting your gut or something, like you were right, audience. Actually, that was him. Yeah, we really love his the way that he moves his body in time and space was why we thought of him. We need someone who has like deep spatial recognition. Like he needs to be able to be the DP on that be the camera operator.
We only have a couple more minutes. I do want to just talk about one scene in particular because I reread the Colson Whitehead book, The Nickel Boys, recently, and no disrespect to that book, which won the Pulitzer Prize, is brilliant, but reading it only made me more impressed with the film as a work of adaptation. Because, as you said, and I think everyone here will understand what I mean, you've really found the life between the words. I mean, this is a film that sort of exists in the space between his prose. And no scene embodies that for me better than the one when Hattie visits Nickel, which is not really in the book.
Which one?
When she meets Turner. Yeah.
Okay.
And
it's my favorite too. It's unbelievable. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No. I mean, it's definitely a standout, but it's what I find so powerful about it is that it takes us out of this binary of with Elwood or with Turner, and it sort of triangulates it in a way because suddenly we're in a third perspective where we have privileged knowledge between the two of them, where we hold one secret and we sort of better understand the emotional matrix between them. And it's also sort of remarkably distills like 10 pages of description of Turner into like one choice that he makes. But anyway, but there's that shot. I mean, for me, the purpose of the scene, and I promise I'll stop talking in a second, is when Hattie hugs Turner and the camera is pressed into her dress, and sort of the darkness of the world is blotted out by the texture of her dress, and it kind of felt like a moment where your visual strategy was reshaping the story, was shaping the story that you were telling and how you told that story, where the visuals were leading the way. And I just like, I don't know if there's after all that a question, but there, you originally wrote the script as a series of images, and that felt like it sort of crystallized how that may have worked. I mean, can you just talk about like leading with images and creating these scenes?
Yeah, I just loved the way you just articulated that. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you for saving me from.
No, I mean really, the blotting out of the world thing. It's like, I don't know. This isn't exactly what you're asking, but I just like feel so much for Elwood and Turner. It's just, I know people who are just, and I'm sure you all did too, but who are just fucking brilliant, and they're just like so shady, and they weren't born shady, like they had some shit happen to them, and they're like hustling, they're like gaming the system. And we don't show Turner gaming, but like I just empathize so much with his like not getting the thing, and it like just like doing these little behaviors because you're the only person that's ever been there for yourself. So without accountability to anyone else, you just build these bizarre habits. You just become maybe pathological or something. But separately, that scene to me was, I think, that scene in the bar scene was like, oh, that's what happens when you see a scene in a film and you're like, how the fuck did that happen? Where you're just like, how does someone direct that? You don't. It like does itself. Like Aunjanue just I don't know, like she just did the thing. I gave her a couple more direction, but like I don't know, like it just affected it. But what she did, I think Sam Ellison was on the camera, the way that Sam came in perfectly as planned, the way that, when she welled up, like, it was just like so, I hate to say transcendental because it's like more Christian than Buddhist, and I'm like trying to make these points about the camera and everything being here, but like, fuck, was that like really, really fulfilling.
I mean, it's so beautiful, but at the same time, you also feel Turner's distrust for her and for the world.
Yeah.
It's like a hint of menace almost.
Yeah.
And it's just extraordinary. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't want to end this conversation without just talking about
Well,
it.
I know we have to go, but I'll actually answer your question because I think really quick, because I now can answer it now that we've talked about it, is that to me to lead with visuals is to actually lead with the world, because then we put narrative on visuals, which is what, we perceive the world, it goes through in our brain makes meaning, and then we do that. But outside of that, there is no meaning, some could argue. I think cinema forefronts narrative, and then the visuals are always tethered to the narrative, which to me is like just not the way the world is. And I don't think cinema should necessarily be the way the world is. We need all the cinema that's existed, but I think that there's just so much more with the bountifulness of what it is to be a person in the world.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully filmed. RaMell Ross, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening.